Andiamo? Buongiorno. Dunque, penso che sia veramente... Questa è la prima volta che... è una delle prime volte che presento questo libro. Oh, sorry. This is one of the first time I present this book, the book that I worked on, which is called The Dawn of Physical Yoga. Actually, I just presented 2 days ago at the SOAS, the yoga center of the SOAS University in London. And I think it's very important for me to present this book here because, first of all, it's a fruit of a long research that I have been doing for at least 3 years. I took my sabbatical year. Sorry, I forgot also to stop. So I took a sabbatical year and I went traveling a long time for 1 year in Sikkim, in Darjeeling, in Delhi, looking for these sources and people who were also working masters who were doing yantra yoga. But the real reason why I started to work on this text and on this subject is because for a long time I've been very, very interested to the origin of yantra yoga. And I actually had to work on a field subject that I didn't know was so important in yoga studies on yoga, which is the origin of physical yoga, of Haṭhayoga. Because as you might know, Haṭhayoga is a global phenomenon that initiated at the end of 19th century. Although the first text that describes some physical yoga practices belongs to the 14th or 15th century, the yoga that we know is so widespread in all places of the world, is a real global phenomenon, is a recent phenomenon. And it is due to some yogins, some masters, very important, very well-known master, that if you have been working on Hatha Yoga also, you know, you should know, I mean, everybody knows this, like Sri Yogendra. It's the end of 19th century, Swami Kulayarananda, and the very famous Krishnamacharya, who is the origin of the Vinyasa Yoga. If you go many places, they practice Vinyasa Yoga. This is due because this great yogin, that was born in 1888, developed a system that he himself called Vinyasa Yoga. So it is a very recent phenomenon, like Patabi Joyce or maybe Iyengar, you know these names. And you see, among these, I also put Chogyal Namkha Norbu Rinpoche, because he is, in my opinion, he is one of those who brought the yoga for the Western people and opened it up to the Western practice, and he is the only one who brought yantra yoga So that's why it's quite important for us to understand what is the origin of yoga. Of course, we have our traditional way of looking at it, the emic. You remember yesterday I spoke about this differentiation about emic and etic, which means the transmission, the narration that the transmission says about it. And of course it is beyond times, and historical. So we have to find the sources, we have to see really the texts, which are the first text. And this is called the etic transmission, tradition, or way, perspective. So if you want to make a research from an ethic point of view to the origin of Yantra Yoga, you have to find texts and try to see how does it collocate this system among the system of global Hatha Yoga phenomenon. And what is very interesting to know, and maybe is not very well known, it's not a knowledge that the majority people have. The word Hatha Yoga is a Buddhist term. It's a Buddhist practice that began quite early in the tantras. It is a method, the Hatha Yoga method is a practice that doing, again, you remember I told you that the practice, and you know very well, the practice of tantra, the transformation, the visualization, is divided in two phases, the kirim and sorim. So during the zorim phase of the tantra, that you know, like anuttara tantra you say, but this is not correct. The real word in Sanskrit is niruttara, which is the same meaning, the superior tantras. It is called the Lanamepa Gyu. No? You know about this. All the practices of these superior tantras have a phase which is called zorim, which is the most important practice of the tantra. So you have the zorim of Guhya Samaja, the zorim of Evajra Tantra, the zorim of all the practices. Also you do zorim. So in the Guhya Samaja Tantra, which is one of the earliest tantras that was written down, and we have witnesses in Sanskrit that it belongs to the 7th, 8th century of the Common Era. It comes up this word which is called Hatha Yoga. And they say in the Tantra, if you cannot achieve the zorim practice, if you are not able to do it quickly, you have to use this method. Hatha means force. So this is hatena, means with force. In Tibetan we have, the word for Hatha Yoga in Tibetan is Tsen Tapki Naljor, the yoga made up of force. Of course, we have to understand what does force mean in this case, and I will explain you. So I will show you the text that explain exactly what, for instance, Naropa was saying, and we have the text in Sanskrit, of the meaning of Hatha Yoga in the Tantra. So actually this is something that I myself discovered while I was doing the studies on the Kala Chakra, because I was very fortunate to work on the root text of the Kala Chakra. Maybe you know, I published a text which is called Initiation, which is the translation of a text by Naropa, written in Sanskrit. Naropa wrote in Sanskrit this commentary to the fifth chapter of the Kala Chakra, so to the chapter of wisdom. The Kala Chakra is divided in different chapters. The last one is a really incredible and beautiful text on the wisdom of the Mahamudra wisdom, the Kala Chakra. He says on the immovable wisdom, the wisdom that goes beyond time. Kala Chakra is which means the tantra of time, no, Kala Chakra, of the root of the wheel of time, with the wisdom of the fifth, practicing the Kala Chakra, then you arrive to a state which is beyond time and beyond movement. So Naropa wrote a text, very detailed text of the practice, and that was the first time while I was translating. I was working with a very, very great scholar of Sanskrit who is called Raniero Gnoli. We were working together, and I was seeing what is the Sanskrit, what is the Tibetan. The Tibetan translation was really very faithful. And then we arrived to the part where, explaining the Zorim phase, there was an explanation of what is Haṭhayoga. I remember I said, oh, that is Haṭhayoga. That was the first time I saw it. And it was a surprise for me, because actually I thought that was a completely Hindu Shaiva method. While I found it, and it was, then I discovered that the word Haṭhayoga is a Buddhist tantric word. The first time they used it is in the Buddhist text. Buddhist tantras, though, not the Prajna Paramita, of course. Buddhist yoga text connected with the Guhya Samaja, and then with the Vajra Tantra, then with the Kala Chakra Tantra, etc. They have this method, which obviously at the beginning is not a physical practice. So now we have two levels, two themes that we have to explore. One is the origin of Haṭhayoga and the original practice of Haṭhayoga, and the other is the physical yoga. When does it start? Because the scholars of Haṭhayoga, of yogas, there are many scholars that are working on this. They are trying to see, as it is quite a late phenomenon in India, which are the sources that witness some practice, some physical practice before the 15th century. So first of all, let's try to understand what is Haṭhayoga in Buddhist tantric sources, and then we see the physical yoga, where does it start? Because at the beginning it's not really physical. You to do this practice, this Haṭhayoga in the Tantra, you don't do physical movement. It is connected, now I will explain, to the chakra, to the channels, to the breathing. So in the Guhya Samaja, c'è qualcosa che non va? I don't know.
Because it disappeared.
Condividi. Forse devo fare questo, sai? Ah no, 2. Yes? Aspetta, però questo me lo devi togliere. So in the Guhya Samaja, repeat, from an ethic point of view, the Guhya Samaja is the first one of the first texts that we have completely written in Sanskrit in India. They say that if a practitioner during the Zorim phase of this yoga, which is called 6 limbs yoga, Shadanga yoga, and this Shadanga yoga is a fundamental part of the utpannakrama phase of the Zorim. So during the Shadanga yoga, if the practitioner fails to achieve visionary experience, leading to realization after 3 attempts of 6 months, so if he really doesn't have visions, he must resort to Haṭhayoga, a forceful approach that will bring awakening and the perfection of wisdom. Another thing that I have to say that also, you know that in Tantra, like in Guhya Samaja and very much in the Gala Chakra, when the practitioner does the practice of Zorim, there are visions that appears. Like, maybe you heard about the fireflies, like smoke, and then at the end, they have vision of tigle. Tigle, like means a sphere in the sky. So these apparitions are like a sign of the practice. So you say, if the apparition doesn't appear, you have to do something else. You have to do a method, a quick method, a forceful method, which is called Haṭhayoga. Okay. Okay? So which are these 6 limbs of the yoga? Also, I'm sure we follow other system, which is not really the Niruttara Tantra system, like Hanuyoga, but we have, I'm sure you can follow because there are very similarities. I'm not going through the 6 limbs, which you have to do during the Zorim phase, but let's see which are the most important from our point of view. Because the 6 are the withdrawal of the sense, with the practice you withdraw all the senses, then you do contemplation, then you do breath control, then you do retention, so holding the breath, then you do mindfulness, then you do meditative absorption. These are the 6 limbs yoga. And you have not to confuse with the 6 yogas of Naropa. Although Naropa wrote a commentary of the Kala Chakra, and he wrote about this Shadanga yoga, then he also, according to the tradition, made up a system which is called the 6 yogas of Naropa. And you know the 6 yogas of Naropa, like you know the Tummo, the Wazel, the clear light yoga, the dream yoga, the illusory body, the gyudrul, the julu, the bardo, the yoga of the intermediate state, and the powa. I mean, I'm sure you know about these systems that are connected with the practice of that Naropa, according to the tradition, gave, but in also in other systems, also in the Nima system, they have all these kind of practices, no? Like the Tumma, for instance. Now we have to concentrate to this practice, the Tumma practice. Because, let's see, when going to the pranayama, the third of the limbs of the yoga of utpannakrama, you arrive to this explanation of what is Haṭhayoga, he say. And this is a text that we have in Sanskrit, written by a historical figure that was Naropa, and that is a commentary to the Kalachakra. What he say? Now let's explain Haṭhayoga. There are two words for translating Haṭhayoga, which is Tsen Tapki Naljor. So it means the tab means method. The method, the forceful method, and top Kinaljor, top directly means with strength method. So it's considered a violent, hot, forceful method. He says, here, when the mutable moment does not manifest, now we know that this immutable moment is the final moment connected with the ultimate wisdom. When the mutable moment does not manifest, because the vital breath is not controlled, even if an image is perceived through the process of withdrawal, because he is talking about the six, so the first is the withdrawal. In that moment, the yogin, by practicing the inner sound, forcefully directing the vital breath into the avaduti, we realize the immutable moment through non-vibration by arresting the bodhicitta bindu in the Vajra gem located in the lotus of wisdom. This is Haṭhayoga. So this is the, how you say, for me, it's in a nutshell, is a summary of what exactly is Haṭhayoga in the practice of Tantra. Of course, we have to know many things to understand it well. The practice of inner sound. This is something that is not very, very well known in the Buddhist tradition, or I don't know if you have heard about it, but in the Haṭhayoga Shaiva system, they talk a lot about nada, nada abhyasa. In Tibetan, they translate it in the same way. They say nada gompa. Gompa means meditation on the nada, which is something that is not really a word that has a meaning, is a secret word that means the inner sound. So, and now I will explain, although it's a little bit complicated, I will try to explain it. So he will do the inner sound, and by this practice, he will direct the vital breath into the avaduti, so the central channel. And this is something that I'm sure you understand very well, because you know that the breathing is in the yantra yoga, but everywhere, in the pranayama, in the Hindu yoga, everywhere there are two main channels, the solar and lunar, and the breathing must be conducted inside the central channel. This is a practice that you know, and you do also when you do Haṭhayoga, Yantra Yoga, no? It's important. So this is the most important thing, to bring the breathing inside the Avaduti, the central channel. And doing this practice, of course, breathing is a pranayama system, pranayama practice, we realize the immutable moment through non-vibration. Now what does it say? Arresting the bodhicitta bindu. Bodhicitta bindu is the essential, vital essence of the persons. And it corresponds to the semen for men and to the blood for women. So they are also here mentioning the sexual yoga practice, the union of female and male, the union of yab-yum. This is connected. This is a practice that in the Niruttara Tantra is very important, especially because in this way you can arrest, with the practice, you can arrest the bodhicitta bindu where? In the Vajra gem, which means in the phallus, located in the lotus. Okay, so this is a practice. That's why it's very secret, because this is a sexual practice. So doing the practice you do doing sexual yoga. But arresting this, then you do this Hatha Yoga. Okay? Can I go on? So now let's see what is inner sound, and also let's see if you recognize something about in this practice. So he say the prana energy, but he says Shakti in Sanskrit, the Pneuma in Tibetan. So this prana energy ascends from the navel center to the ultimate abode. Of course, you have to visualize the chakra. There are there is the Avaduti, there are the chakras, there is the navel chakras, there is the superior head chakra, no? So the energy ascends from the navels to the ultimate abode. Qua io non leggo, non so come devo fare. Vabbè. It is halted at the navel chakra, and like radiant lightning in the form of a stick, proceeds smoothly and quiveringly along the Avaduti, moving from one chakra to the next until it forcefully pierces the orifice of Ujnisha, similar to a thorn piercing the skin. Clear? So there is a radiant light, like lightning, that from the navel goes up and arrives to the ultimate abode, piercing the head chakra. Does this practice remind you something? The Pova, very similar, yes. At this moment, the yogin must pull the apana, means the lower prana, very forceful upward into the central channel. Once, so the lower, in Tibetan is the tour du sel, the lower prana must be put up, brought up into the central channel. And once the two winds, the solar and lunar prana, or in this case, the prana and apana, so means the lower prana and the superior prana, are brought together into the central channel, they break through the nisha and ascend to the supreme citadel, the Parapura. Thus the yogin becomes the yogin's universal mother, endowed with the 5 supernormal knowledges. Okay? So this is a method. It's a tantric method that is called, in this case, Nada Bhasha, but this is a tantric method that developed and was developed in the 6 yogas of Naropa, and it became like the Poa. Then in the text we have another practice in the Zorim phase that I'm sure you know, which is called the Tummo. The Tummo practice is in Sanskrit they say Chandali. You know what is Chandali? Is the outcast woman, the woman that nobody has to touch, untouchable. The Tibetan translate again, they translate interpreted it, because Tummo means the fierceful woman, doesn't say the laundry woman like the Sanskrit. They say Tummo, the forceful. Tum means a fierce, forceful woman. Mo is feminine, so it has a feminine connotation. And then he says, the prana, because it is the protector of the mind, is one's own mantra. Take it as it is, because I am not going to explain, but this is something that should be explained. Like he says, the prana is an old etymology of prana. Prana means the protector of the mind. This prana should be meditated upon, and within the navel ascends chakra to the heart until it reaches the bindu, that is the place where bindu resides, the forehead. So here you have the prana that goes from chakra to chakra and arrives to the head. There it must be halted, and the jewel accompanied by the senses must be halted, namely it must be rid of coming and going. This is what is stated as retention, dharana. Again, it's talking about the semen. Again, it's talking about sexual practice. But what is important is that then this great jewel, once halted, that is, it made immovable by the limb of retention, will cause the chandali, so the tummo, this energy, this feminine energy that is everybody has and is connected with the sexual energy, will cause the chandali to arise from the navel chakra through the adamantine path, the avaduti, to the elements of the ether, to the chakra of the head. So it goes on. It then, emerging from the chakra of the head, will dissolve the syllable hum, the white hum, you remember? And having dissolved it, will lead the 4 bindus, essences of body, voice, mind, and knowledge, each aligned with the 4 blisses, the 4 gawa in Tibetan, the 4 blisses that is the final, it's very important in the tantras, the 4 blisses, to the chakra of the Vajra gem. For a long period in this community, the master taught the tummo, so many people know very well this practice. So this is the practice that he's describing. After retention, the chandali, so the tumo, immediately ignites, and this is the teaching of the master. Okay, so this is the practice of the inner it. So now I have to bring you to another very connected field, but is another field. That is the field of alchemy. In all the tantras, this transmutation, this transformation of passions, you know very well, tantra is transformation, no? Transformation, passions in wisdom. They use a metaphor, which is the metaphor of transforming the iron in gold. This is very well, quite widespread in the tantras as a metaphor. Especially this mercury metaphor, mercury calcination. We say calcination is an alchemical term to explain this transformation. In the Kala chakra, the mercury calcination is very important. He speaks about mercury, so this alchemical method. But it doesn't speak about the alchemical method, it uses it as a metaphor. He says, like mercury, as well as mercury transforms with fire the iron into gold, in the same way the fire of the karma mudra, so the fire of the female, will transform through mercury, the mercury that is must be let's say cooked, must be heated very much to become, the mercury must be the method of alchemy is this, that you put the things and also the mercury into the pot. This kind of pot is called yantra in India, and I will show you. So in the pot it must be put this mercury, and then must be cooked with fire, on fire, and then there is the transformation into gold. This is the metaphor, and the parallel, the elements of this metaphor are bodhicitta is the mercury, the karma mudra, we spoke about karma mudra yesterday, is the fire, and the gold is the sahajananda, so the spontaneous innate bliss, so the ultimate bliss, the bliss that arrives as a result of the practice. Okay? In fact, we have this text. Therefore, the yogin endowed with wisdom should ensure that bodhicitta is not emitted. This is also another, we also spoke about this, no? Retention, the yogin in the Niruttara Tantra have not to emit the semen. The semen must be brought inside, and from inside becomes brought above the channels to the head, and then flow down as a wisdom, and this will be the practice, the result of the practice, and this will bring the real joy. So the yogin endowed with wisdom should ensure that bodhicitta is not emitted, with the words to gradually realize the supreme unmoving state A moving state means that the spanda, the movement of the bodhicitta, of the semen, because in the tantras bodhicitta means semen, is arrested, is blocked, is stopped. The yogin should meditate on the unions of the two organs, what the Lord Buddha intended to signify was meditation on bliss, not the emission of bodhicitta. So this is the very, very secret method of the Tantra, which is the retention of the semen. This habitual tendency towards emission is the very nature of the adventitious defilement of passions, of klesha in Sanskrit, so of the defilements, since beginningless time have bound sentient beings to samsara. Through union with the mudra, the tendency towards emission is transformed into the tendency towards non-emission, just like mercury and fire. And in fact, he says, fire is the enemy of mercury. Without fire, mercury can never be bound. Bound in English is okay. It's very interesting because in Sanskrit we say banda. Without binding, there can be. Perché questo non lo leggo. Well, there can be no gold. Scusate perché non vedo più lo schermo. Without gold, the alchemist derives no enjoyment. In the same way, without the union with a woman, the yogin's binding of bodhicitta, citta bandhya, cannot occur. If it is not bound, the body cannot be perceived or transmuted. Without bodily transmutation, the spontaneous arisen bliss, the sahajananda, is not bestowed. Okay? This is something that we have to understand. And we have three key words here that are important. One is bandha. One is mudra in the sense of karma mudra, so the woman. And one is Veda, which means transmutation, which means piercing. Literally it means piercing. But this piercing corresponds to the transmutation. Okay? And now we have to arrive to another text, which is the origin of my studies. Because in Nepal, in 2012, so a long time ago, as American scholar Schaeffer discovered a text which is called Amrita Siddhi. Amrita Siddhi exactly means Amrita. You know, Amrita is the nectar, but Amrita, the word also is A is negative, Mrita means death. We saw it with Mrityu Mara. So Mrita means death. Amrita means without death, immortal, chime. And also this chime is a word that you are quite, you know this word, chime. Is a very important word in the alchemical systems, because why do the alchemists in the past in India and in the tantras they were using alchemy to arrive to long life and immortality in a way, so without death. Also the practice that we have been doing so much, this like the Chulen. The Chulen is, in Sanskrit it is Rasayana, which is the practice of alchemist. The alchemist, Rasayana is a method, it's very important in India. There are many practices of Rasayana. And the Tibetans also have their practice of alchemy. So when you do Chulen, you maybe don't know, but you are doing an alchemical practice of transformation, the elements in pure elements, and obtaining immortality. If you don't get immortality, you at least get long life. Okay? So Chime, you know this Chime practice. Amrita Siddhi means the obtainment of immortality. This practice, this text is incredibly, for me, very important and very interesting, and also for the scholars studying the origin of yoga. They understood that this text, the Amrita Siddhi, which was found in Nepal, written in a kind of written system similar to the Sanskrit, but also in Tibetan. It's very interesting because it is, you see, maybe here you see, there is the Sanskrit line above, then there is the Sanskrit, the Tibetan transliteration of the Sanskrit. Like a Tibetan will say, I cannot read this Devanagari, I cannot read this system, no? The Indian system. I cannot read it. Please, can you transform it in Tibetan? So like Ba becomes Ba. So a Tibetan can read it, but in Sanskrit. So a transliteration of the Sanskrit words and a translation in Tibetan. So there are 3 lines in this text that I'll show you again. You see there are 3 lines. There is the Sanskrit, then there is the transliteration in Tibetan, and then the translation in Tibetan. They found this text and they started to work on it. And very recently you have the power? You see the power? And very recently, now time has passed by, in 2021, 2 scholars translated this text, the Amrita Siddhi, and translated another text in the same publication, which is called Amrita Siddhi Mula, so the root tantra of Amrita Siddhi, that is found only in Tibetan. We don't have the Sanskrit text. So they translated a Sanskrit and a Tibetan text connected with the Amrita Siddhi. And they said, this is the first text of physical, they discovered, they made, after a long study, they say this is a text belongs to the 11th century, and this is the first text where physical yoga is described. Then in the introduction they say, oh, there is a long material, a vast material in Tibetan, in the Tanjur, connected with the text, but we cannot do it. I mean, we hope that in the future some Tibetologists would study it. Then I read it and I say, I want to see what is it. Let's see what is it. Then I went to the Tanjur. You know, the Tanjur is very important for the Tibetans because in the Tanjur there are all texts that they believe are the original Indian text because they are translation. The Tanjur is a compilation, a big compilation of translated text from Sanskrit to Tibetan. And in some schools, starting from the beginning, like the ones that compiled the Kanjur and then Tanjur, they had an idea. We put in the kanjur and the tanjur only the texts that we are sure that there is a Sanskrit original. They are really written in Sanskrit in the land of Buddha. They are really Buddha Vachana, word of the Buddha. The other text that they had, like in the 11th, 12th century, they had some texts in Tibetan. We don't want to put it. We don't recognize as orthodox. We don't recognize as real word of the Buddha. You have to understand this is very important. While in the Nima tradition, in the Terma tradition, all these texts which are not found in Sanskrit, they are not considered word of the Buddha. They are considered apocrypha. So this text not only is preserved in the Tanjur, but is also quite important with this Amrita Siddhi. So I thought this is something I have to look. And I went in the Tanjur and I found there are many, of course, there are many kinds of, many editions of the Tanjur. And I found a corpus, a very incredible, important, and fantastic corpus of 21 texts written in Tibetan that are not in Sanskrit, but they were considered original Sanskrit text. So they have, the Tibetan considered that they came from India and were translated. So these texts are all texts that explain this Amrita Siddhi, this yoga text. And the Amrita Siddhi is a yoga text and also an alchemical text. Why it is a yoga and alchemical text? It is a yoga text, and they say it is, the scholars of Haṭhayoga says this is the first text on Haṭhayoga. And this is the first text on Haṭhayoga. It was written down in a Buddhist tantric context. So the first text on Haṭhayoga is Buddhist. Okay? And as they say, there are only 3 mudra. In the beginning, they didn't spoke about asana. They spoke about mudra, which has the same meaning of asana. It means postures, practices, physical practice. They have only 3 physical practice. One is called Mahamudra, one is called Mahabandha, and the other is called Mahaveda. And after some times, it came up to my mind that as the Amrita Siddhi and the Kala Chakra are very connected. I mean, the Kala Chakra was dated beginning of the 11th century, very beginning. For my opinion, it could be also the end of 10th century. Let's say the year 1000. 1000, 1012, 1021, these are the possible dates. Or 958, 980 is from at the beginning of the new millennium, of the second millennium. And the Amrita Siddhi it belongs to the same time. And also they have many, now I'm not going to explain why I think they are connected, but there are many similarities. In the fact also that they use alchemical terminology. And also in the Amrita Siddhi they say the word is the man is a microcosm in the macrocosm, and there are all also in the Kala Chakra you have this, all the description of the cosmos, etc. So it is, alchemy is very important in the Kala Chakra. Like, for instance, in the Laghu Kala chakra, the important, the root tantra of the Laghu Kala, of the Kala chakra tantra, we found this explanation. Without union with a woman, the yogin's binding of bodhicitta cannot occur. So we're talking about that practice that we talked about before, no? The sexual practice. Without a woman, the binding of bodhicitta cannot occur. If it is not bound, the body cannot be pierced or transmuted. Without bodily transmutation, avidya, so he used the same word, the spontaneously arising bliss, the sahajananda, is not bestowed. Okay, so without a mudra, so without karma mudra, the binding, the retention, mahabandha, cannot occur, and the mahaveda, so the transmutation, cannot be obtained. So you see, I think the way, because they were saying, but why do they use this word for these practices? And I think the way, the process is this one: the the karma mudra, the bandha, and the piercing or the transmutation. So I will not explain the Amrita Siddhi, but the text that I worked on, this one, that I call the Dawn of Physical Yoga, it is a text written in Tibetan, this one, we found in the Tanjur, and it is not really a commentary, but it is an explanation of how to arrive to the practice, how to overcome the hindrances, how you dispel the hindrances of the practice of Amrita Siddhi. And it's quite a very interesting text where there are 36 chapters where are described 108 physical movements, really physical movement like yoga, that he calls chulkor, that he calls yantra, and that are devised for dispelling the hindrances, to overcome the defects. And then if you read the text, it's also very interesting because every chapter is one defect. So how you dispel the first, and the first, what is the first? Is the practice of shine. And then what is the second? Is the practice of lanton. And what is the third? Is the, many of those are defect of pride. Or defect on, they are described, all the defects. If you have a list of the defects, it's a perfect, like you say, manifesto of what is the tantra practice. Quite different from the Hinayana, for instance, for the Theravada, for the precedent phase of Buddhism. Why? Because in a certain point say, if you don't work on your senses, if you despite the senses, you will not attain liberation. While in the Theravada system, you have to avoid the senses. In the Tantra, you have to use the senses. No? So it's a perfect description of the tantric vision, starting from samatha and vipassana. So it is Buddhist. It's definitely a practice of Buddhism. And this is considered one of the first texts of real physical yoga. Then at this point I got another idea. This is absolutely my hypothesis, my idea. Why do they call this movement yantra? I have to tell you frankly that when I started this text, as in this, I was very ignorant. Of course, it's not because I was sure, but as it doesn't come up very much that the movement, the physical movement, are called yantra in Indian practices, I thought maybe this is a back translation. So the Tibetans say tulkor, and then they found a term in Sanskrit that was connected with this. But it was a doubt, no? When you study, you have to try to have some hypotheses, some ideas, and then you have to explore and try to see what you have in the senses, in the texts, in the witnesses. So my idea was, maybe they back translated that. They did the tulkor and then they called them yantra because tulkor also is a translation of the word yantra in Sanskrit. You know, yantra are also the diagram in the Hindu traditions. Maybe you have seen many diagrams that are called yantra. So yantra means many things. It's a polysemous word. But then in the Amrita Siddhi, in the text in Sanskrit that I showed you before, there are two instances explaining the Mahaveda where the author speaks of yantra, and in the way he says, he used the word yantra to say physical exercise. In one is a physical exercise in one instance, and in the other is a breathing exercise in Sanskrit. So I say, okay, they have it. They have it in Sanskrit, and they use it as physical exercise. Then my hypothesis, take it as it is, a hypothesis, I'm not sure. As we are in a contest of alchemy, and in the alchemy, mercurial alchemy, and in this alchemy, in the text, the body becomes like the apparatus. You call apparatus. These are the sort of big, how you say calderone in English? Big pot, let's say. Big pot that you put on fire where you cook, let's say mercury. That is very important for calcination of mercury. These are called yantra in Sanskrit. I don't know if you can see this text. You see? All this, I found this description of all these pots in a very important book on Indian alchemy, where all these pots are called yantra. So I thought, rather than thinking to these diagrams, which is also a reason, a meaning of yantra, maybe they were thinking to this body that becomes like a pot that where the inner heat is cooked, let's say, is transmuted, leads to the transmutation of physical elements in the superior sublimal element, where the sublimation, where the transmutation is done. So in this way, the yantra movement are the alchemical movements where the body becomes the pot where the inner heat of transmutation is, developed. This is only my hypothesis, but I think it's quite interesting, because they call them yantra. So let's see the word trulkor. This is also something that we have at the end of this Amrita Siddhi. This is not called Amrita Siddhi, but it's called Amrita Sankata Nibbana. In Tibetan is Chimegi Transel. So that removes the obstacles, dispels the hindrances to the practice of the Amrita, of the Chime, of the realization of immortality. So in this text, the word yantra is only at the end. You say, we have 36 trulkor, and at the beginning the word is trulkor written in this way, but also in other texts it is written in another way. So for those who know Tibetan, rather than the ka is written with the pa, trulkor. And truva means also illusion, magic. So sometimes you have heard about, some people have translated it like magical movements. Maybe because this trul reminds the magical movement of, like illusion. But actually I don't think this is it's fascinating translation, it's a nice translation, but it doesn't correspond to the meaning of the text, of the word. While there is also a 13th century text written in Tibetan and translated in Chinese of this trulkor that is found in the Palace Museum in China, in Peking, where the word trulkor is translated luan lun, which means lun, kor means, in fact, is translated quite, literally, because kor means will, and trul could be also illusion or trul, also confusion. So they translated luan lun meaning confused will. So you see many people translate in their own way a word that actually we don't know exactly why they called it yantra, no? I don't know if we have, how long we have. I don't want to, maybe it's a little bit tiring to follow. I go. So now let's see what's the history of this text. We have, in the text they say, it is transmitted by Virupa. But it was the Amrita Siddhi, the text, the root text, is called, it was written down very probably by a scholar, a pandit, a yogin, Indian yogi who was called Madhava Chandra or Avaduta Chandra. In Tibetan we have Huma, like is Avaduta, Chandra is Dawa, moon, no? And the transmission of this text is quite interesting, because they say the Amrita Siddhi went from Virupa to Kala Virupa, which is another is the disciple student of Virupa, is called the Black Virupa, and Enadeva, Or maybe it's not very easy to understand all these names of these yogins, and many are epithets, and many are like Virupa. Could have been a historical person, but we don't have too much about him. But he's considered the origin of, like in the Sakya tradition, everything origins from the Virupa teaching. The Lamdre teaching of the Sakya belongs to the Virupa. In the Nat tradition of the Shaiva, we have a Virupa, Virupaksha. So it's very difficult to understand who is who. And another person, and this is the author of this book, is Amoghavajra. In my family, for a long time, I was really getting crazy to understand who was this Amoghavajra. So they were teasing me, saying, did you find Amoghavajra? Where is Amoghavajra? I was looking for Amoghavajra in my dreams everywhere. Who is this Amoghavajra? But actually, Amoghavajra is quite important in the Tibetan Tenjur, because it's the name of one of the translators. Is called Donyon Dorje. He lived in Tibet in the 12th century, end of 11th, beginning of the 12th century, and he did a lot of translations. So we have many translations by this Amoghavajra. Then we have this text, the 21, and also many other that are connected with the Amrita Siddhi in the Tenjur. In the colophon they say, taught by Virupa and written down, in Tibetan they say, Zepa, compiled, written down by Amoghavajra. So, from our point of view, Amoghavajra is the one who wrote it. And it could be, another hypothesis that I do, is that he was a yogin, Indian Buddhist tantric yogin, who was traveling in Tibet in this century, and he became one of the pandit who helped the Lotsawa, the translators, to translate the text in Sanskrit, from Sanskrit to Tibetan. The Tanjur, they say it's a monument of translation of all the epoch, all the cultures. The Tibetans made the biggest monuments to the translation that you never would ever imagine. They translated all the texts in quite a short period, from the 8th century to the 11th century. They translated all the texts that arrived from India. And how did this translation? They did the translation working together. One Indian and one Tibetan, the Pandit and the Lotsawa. They worked together and they produced this, I think is incredible, fantastic translation of the text. Sometimes I say what in Sanskrit is quite impossible to understand. In Tibetan it's very clear. Why? Because the transmission is kept. Because the Tibetan still do the practice. They know what they talk about. They practice it. While in India it's lost, the Buddhist transmission. The Buddhist tantric at least. So what is also very important, is that this period is very important for the Buddhism to develop in Tibet, to arrive to Tibet, to be transmitted in Tibet, and develop in Tibet. With the help of these yogin that were escaping from India, not because of the Muslim, because we are in the 11th century, so before the Muslim invasion of India, but because of the conflicts they had with the Shaiva tradition. So they had to escape from India. And when they arrived to Tibet, everybody wanted to follow them. They were given presents, gold. There are some texts where they say how many presents they give to these holy saint Hindu, Indian masters that arrived from India, because they arrived from the land of Buddha, so they were really very much received. So this is the moment where Buddhism was transplanted in Tibet with the help of this yogin that arrived to Tibet. And he, Amoghavajra, lived in Tibet more than 7 years. He knew Tibetan because he had to help to translate, because he is the author of many translations. And it could be that he wrote this text directly in Tibetan. Like there are many Tibetan Lama that now arrive to Tibet, to the West, and they write in English. They speak in English. Same thing, in a way. So he wrote this text in Tibetan, and you can see from the text that he is not a Tibetan author. Is not very fluid, not very easy also to understand. Although it is quite clear because it's a real manual. It's a real manual of yoga. I remember I was translating this in English with the help of Alessandra. We had a lot of fun working on this text, and I have to acknowledge her help because it is a physical yoga. She is a teacher of yoga, so for me it was very important to have her feedback on this text. So I was explaining, you see, she says, put the legs, put the hands, how do you do it? Then we were really getting crazy. Because it is really a physical manual, it's a manual of physical yoga. Like in the text you have, adjust the feet in the Vajra cross-legged posture, clench the fist, put them inside the cross-legged posture, press the ground with strength, bring the weight on the hands, lift the cross-legged posture in the air. You understand this? And then, now I will show some. Then I say, these are positions that there are in the Sanskrit, also they're written in Sanskrit, in the Haṭhayoga, in the Hindu, in the Shaiva Haṭhayoga tradition, in the Nat-Siddha yoga, for instance. Like this is what they call Kukutasana. Actually, in the text is not named. All these positions are not named. So you don't have the position of the lion, all the names that we have also in Sanskrit. In the first text to name the position is this 15th century Haṭhayoga Pradipika. There you have the name of the position in the Hindu Haṭhayoga tradition. But here they are, in a way they are Haṭhayoga. Why? Because they use the word Hatha, Hatena. In Tibetan they say Tsen or top Kinaljar. They use the word top. I counted more than 200 times. In every position, sometimes also twice in the description of the position, they say, do it forcefully, with strength. So after firmly stabilize, for instance, this one. After firmly stabilize the lower vertebra, bend the right leg, cross the ankle over the neck, applying force, you see force, in the right foot, stand up on the left leg, join the palms on the hands at the heart, repeat in the same way on the left side. This is Trivikramasana, for instance. I have to acknowledge that as I'm not an expert of Hatha Yoga, I had the good luck of meeting a scholar of Hatha Yoga who is involved in the studying of the history of Hatha Yoga physical postures, and he helped me to identify all these positions. So I arrived to the conclusion that there are many positions that exist in Hatha Yoga. They are named, while here they are not named, but are the same position, more or less the same position. Not all. There are also all the one that you know very well, like the thick joint and all these losing the joints and all others. So if you read the text, you recognize it's a kind of Drukor quite similar to the one that Nanke Norbu Rinpoche worked on, that he arrives from his tradition. Very similar. And in fact, I'm very surprised that among his texts that Adriano showed me, the text that Rinpoche worked on when he was preparing his book on Yantra Yoga, he had this text, not this one, he had the commentary to the Amrita Siddhi written by Amoghavajra. So you know Amoghavajra, in the book of the Yantra Yoga there are the lotus, suspended lotus are connected to the Amoghavajra system. So Nanke Norbu Rinpoche was one of the only person who knew it, because I've been working with some Lama. I went to seek him as I interviewed some yogins that were practicing Drukor like for instance, I went to the Ramtek monastery in Sikkim, Rumtek, and there is a yogin who very nicely explained to me all this position. He said, they are not my tradition, I'm just following the text and trying to do it. It is something very secret, we cannot do it, you don't tell anybody that I'm doing it with you. But he was very gentle and very kind and he helped me. But he didn't know anything about Amoghavajra. While Rinpoche knew about Amoghavajra, so quite interesting this. In any case, I will show another. So after climbing on a tree, this is a very important position. And you know this work, this book, The Roots of Yoga by Mallinson. If you don't know this book and if you are interested in yoga, please read this book, The Roots of Yoga by James Mallinson. It's a Penguin's book, it's very well widespread. There is the history of all the yoga. In the come si dice copertina? In the cover you have this photo. So this is a ancient ancient position in the system of Hatha Yoga that there is in this book. After climbing on a tree, stay firmly with the hip downward, embrace the trees with the legs and the hands, as if grabbing on a lap, slightly pull up the apana, and forcefully press down the prāṇa and practice with great strength. You see, this is why we could say that this is a Hatha Yoga text. In fact, in the Hatha Yoga system, they have this asana. Fortunately, we don't have this. Sorry? We can. You can try it. You imagine if we had this? No, maybe very kindly Rinpoche took it off. Okay, so we don't have others slides, so I think I can stop here. And I hope it was almost clear. And now, if you have some questions.
Well, thank you again, and amazing work. Really, I'm really impressed. I know that you mentioned that in your first talk, but as we see all this alchemic transformation that comes by the union, not the sexual union, the karma yoga, the union with the female, it is always mentioned as if the yoga wants to achieve that, it's not possible to. And that goes back to the historical condition, which of course was a patriarchal situation and the instructions were given to men, or because there were instructions also for women, or because women didn't need it, or because I've seen is always, the union is always connected to, and I know you mentioned that the reason in the first talk, I just want to know if it goes with the same answer.
So in a way, in the Indian system, the yogini are not really, considered the ones who practice the Haṭhayoga, no? At the beginning. So the mudra is the partner is a consort of the yogin. But they don't really say, no, this is not for women. In a way, no?
And the question related to that, the second one is, so we understand that at the beginning this hatha was actually connected to this alchemic condition in which the sexual union was involved, and then at a certain point with Amrita Siddhi we arrived more to the physical, and that was because there was also the realization that maybe we need to have something that doesn't necessarily always involve the sexual thing. That was the reason, basically.
Yeah, you're right, because, for instance, in the study of the Amrita Siddhi, they say this is for celibate yogin. This practice for celibate yogin. I have to tell you that I'm not really sure that it was for celibate yogin, because what do you mean by celibate in the yogin case? The yogin are always, at least the yogins in the Tibetan tradition, the Narjorpa, they are always out of the monastery. They are celibate in the sense. For me, the reason they say celibate is that there is not emission of the semen. So that's why the retention of the semen is considered a way of being celibate in a way, no? So this is and the retention of the semen is important for the practice in some systems, not always, not always in Hindu tradition, not always in the Tibetan tradition. Sometimes it's not really important, even if there is emission, that's important. But the practice is this one. You have to make the bindu rise up in the avaduti. It's a sort of the tumo practice. It's the inner heat practice. You do it by retention.
But it seems that this retention, of course, can only be performed if you have a partner, no? So if you have I was thinking maybe you are in a cave and you go, and then you need the method that doesn't involve.
No, in fact, the fire of the woman, it's important, but not always. You can imagine it. It's like an apostasis of the mudra. There are some practices, in sexual practices in the tantra, but then, especially in Tibet, when it became a system for the Vajrayana, turned to the monastery tradition, no? Founded the monasteries, and there were they founded all the traditions like the Sakya, at the beginning, the Sakya, the Kaju, the Kadampa, the very first with Atisha. When Atisha came to Tibet, he transformed the yoga in visionary yoga. Is a illusory. It became a kind of metaphor, symbol, became symbolic. Okay. So also the monks can do it in the monastery. In fact, in the practice at Tsalun Chulkor, which is so famous, they used what it could be considered sexual energy, the inner heat, the chandali or the shakti also is in Sanskrit texts we find, but they do without the union of a woman. You can do it.
Yeah, also in our Tsalung, no, we do something.
Also Tsalung. Yeah. Actually, this is considered a method that is not really fundamental. It's more important the retention of the semen.
So there is a question online. I will ask the person to ask it directly. The person who raised the hand, please ask your question. Okay, maybe later.
Any questions from?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Grazie. The way you explain, it seems that nowadays Haṭhayoga somehow lost its original meaning of reason to be. I mean, if we think nowadays about Haṭhayoga, it seems more like a pure physical series of exercise, asana. But so do you think it still has a function? I mean, or is it practiced nowadays in the Western world, or?
Yeah, thank you for your question, because it gives me the opportunity of explaining better what I maybe didn't explain well at the beginning. The Haṭhayoga now as a global movement is completely different from the origin in the Buddhist tantric milieu. They were very, very secret. It is a very secret practice in the Buddhist tradition, and only for few peoples, so very, very for initiated. So then now it is what it is something completely different. In the Indian system, it developed. What is very interesting to see is that from the Amrita Siddhi we have two branches. One went to Tibet and developed in the true core system, and one stayed in India and developed in the Nath Shaiva, the Gorakshnath, for instance. They used this Amara Siddhi. There is the Amrita Siddhi, then there are other texts. In the 12th century, it is called Amaroga Prabodha. I didn't explore this with you in the Indian tradition until they were also re-elaborated in the Haṭhayoga Pradipika. Later, I mean, we are in the 15th century. And in the Haṭhayoga Pradipika, they say it's good for well-being, it's good for inner strength, for the strength of the yogin, for the balance of the elements, but they don't speak about this, let's say, secret tantric practice of the utpannakrama. Absolutely has lost this. While in India, while in Tibet, it is kept. When you say Tsalun Trulkor, in all the tradition, we have in the Sakya tradition, the Kama Kajuk tradition, in the Bompo tradition, they do practice, they do retreat practice, they do secret practice, they are secret. And they are the one, like, we have this practice by Rinpoche, that he is the first one who brought in the West the Yantra Yoga. And he adapted to the Western society, to the Western practice, and he became, for those who know, is a practice for inner heat, is a very important practice for the realization, let's say, but could be also used for health, for physical health. That's why I put his. He's not sharing anyway. No, yes. No. I put his photo together with Iyengar or the other great master of yoga who brought the yoga to the West. So maybe in the community it's not very well known, it's not very well understood how important is Yantra Yoga. Yantra Yoga is an important system, very old system, the oldest system of Hatha Yoga, let's say Hatha Yoga in the sense I explained to you. And the way we have in the book, the way Rinpoche put it for the Western, adapted to the Western tradition, is mirable, is very important. It's very complete, is very rich, is a complete method for realization, let's say, but it's also a very good method for health, for inner heat, but also for mindfulness, for practice, etc., for meditation. It is very important. I always think that it's not so much understood how important it is in our community, from the people of the community. Should be more practice, should be more widespread. It is a real treasure that he gave to this community.
I have one question. I'm not sure this. In this Amrita Siddhi text, there is only instructions on static postures, or also movements and breathing, like in Yantra Yoga of Namkhai Norbu. I mean, instructions of this 108 exercises. Do they include only postures, or they also include instructions on movements and breathing and everything?
They are physical postures which are put in a sequence. Sequence. So the sequence is like, there are 36, that's why I say 108, because each, in that case I say each defect, each hindrance has 3 postures. The preliminary, in the same way that Rinpoche says, the preliminary, the central, and the subsequent. So it's a sequence of 3 physical postures. So in a way, it is similar. It's a dynamic movement. But it's not the same. There are something which are connected, but it's not completely
I'm
the
just
same.
asking because Haṭhayoga is mostly static
Not
system.
the vinyasa, for instance. The vinyasa is a flow.
But vinyasa may be something new, comparably new, no? So, okay, it's clear.
I saw in a previous picture that there is a book published in the Netherlands, in Groningen.
A book published?
In one of the pictures there are different postures. There were photos of different images. And this is published in a book in the Netherlands, in Groningen, in a university.
Yeah, this book, you mean? This book?
No, not your book. If we go back to, there is an image, you see different pictures of different postures. Yes? This one. And this is published in the Netherlands, Groningen, where I was born, by the way. And I wanted to know, are these the positions?
Non ho capito veramente.
The different. Can you go back to the previous? No, the other side, in the other way direction.
Che non va più avanti. Forse troppo
there, yes. No, you went too fast.
Too fast?
The one before. That one.
Questo?
Yes.
This is not on yoga.
What is it? I can't see it. That's why.
Okay. This
Sorry.
is written in German.
No, in Holland.
No,
sorry.
the language is in German.
Yes.
And it is a book on alchemy.
Okay. Because it's okay.
Non si vede bene. Aspetta, vediamo se lo posso allargare. No, forse no.
The yantra, yeah?
Sì. If you like, I can send you this slide.
I can look it up. Thank you.
Yeah, it is published in Groningen, is a supplement to Indian medicine, and by Helwig Oliver, and it is a book on the Indian alchemy. And that's why there are many descriptions of this yantra.
There is a question in Spanish. Can you translate it? Yeah, sure.
È una pregunta en español. La voy a traducir. Amoghavajra era un pandit, brahman, esperto in Veda e Sastra. Loro semplificavano la conoscenza per la gente comune. Devo tradurlo in inglese? Amoghavajra was a pandit, brahman, expert in Vedas and Sastras. They simplified the knowledge for common people. We could say that in arriving to Tibet, he adapted the physical practice to the energetic practice, or could we say that when he arrived in Tibet, he adapted physical practice or energetic practice to the knowledge more connected to energy or more tantric that was in Tibet? This is the question. Then it says, could we say that he elevated Haṭhayoga with Yantra Yoga in a higher form of knowledge and self-realization? And he said, and then she says, "Thank you for your knowledge and for sharing."
I think simply Amoghavajra was a Buddhist tantric master who was teaching his explanation, his practice, his method out of his practice, and for his students that were Tibetans. This is my final conclusion. So he arrived to Tibet, he had some students, he had many followers, he was a practitioner of the Amrita Siddhi, and this he brought down, he says in the text, he brought down. Then he said, but the teaching is from Virupa. So he had some revelation, which, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I told you it was my problem. Who was this Amoghavajra? But definitely he was not, he didn't transform for the Tibetan or what he says. No, he was teaching his method for his students. Like Nankanor Rinpoche came to, after 1,000 years, we have a person like this. He was a master, Buddhist master, who talked, sometimes speaking also in Italian or in English, for his Western audience. Something, history repeats, no, in a way. This is my way of understanding it.
Okay. From the internet, Paula asks, where did Hunkara got the Yantra Yoga from?
I can say that I had the obsession of Amoghavajra, but now please don't give me another obsession. Okay, so now let's do Yantra Yoga. Thank you for your attention.